Hey, I'm Randy, and you're watching The Cheap Audio Man. Here at The Cheap Audio Man, we concentrate on high-value hi-fi and home theater products. And today, we're talking about the SVS Ultra bookshelves. We're also going to talk about the SVS Prime bookshelves. Are the SVS Ultras twice as good as the SVS Primes? I don't know. Stick around and let's find out. Grab a cup of coffee, sit down, and let's talk about the SVS Ultras. Today's sponsor, Sith Audio. They've done it again. Sith Audio audiophile envelopes. We all know how often people correspond by written word these days. So if you're an audiophile or at all interested or a hi-fi enthusiast, there's only one envelope to choose from. It's the only audiophile grade certified envelope out there. Sith Audio audiophile envelopes. So I mentioned in the video that the tweeters in the SVS Ultras and the Primes are the same. They actually aren't. When I was checking out the frequency responses on both of those speakers, I noticed that the Ultras have a higher top-end extension. So I reached out to SVS and they did confirm today that the tweeters are indeed different. Although they look identical on the outside, they are actually different. The Ultras, the tweeter in the Ultras, has a different motor structure, which brings down the impedance a little bit, but gives it a little bit more top-end extension. Now, this isn't really widely stated in their literature. So, bear in mind throughout the video, if I refer to them as having the same tweeter, they don't. Although they are voiced in timbre matched, they don't actually have the same tweeter. The Ultras are the top-tier bookshelf speaker from SVS. If you haven't heard of SVS, probably that's not the case because they make awesome subwoofers and they have an awesome app for their subwoofer. So you don't have to climb in behind the subwoofer to dial in the crossover, the gain, etc. The Ultras are rated from 45 Hertz all the way up to 32,000 Hertz. That basically means how low they play and how high they play. Their efficiency is 87 dB, which means how loud they play at a given power rating. They're also rated at 8 ohms for their resistance. What does that all mean? It means they're not too terribly hard to drive. 87 dB is not super low, it's not super high, it's right in the middle. The Ultras are a handsome speaker, as you can see. They come in either black or white. The finish is piano gloss, which means you're gonna get fingerprints on them, but they look very, very nice. Probably the best looking speaker that I've had come through here. Also, they're not just a rectangle, so they have some bevels on the bottom, bevels on the top of the baffle, kind of going into the side, which is good for edge diffraction, which means it makes the sound better. They kind of go up like that. They kind of look like an obelisk. In the comments, what's your favorite obelisk? Put it down in the comments. The Ultras have a 1-inch aluminum dome tweeter, and it's the same tweeter across all of the SVS speakers, which is a good thing. In home theater, you want the speakers to be timbre matched or voice matched, which means if you got someone talking out of the center channel and then all of a sudden they go to the left, it's not going to sound different. It's going to sound the same because it's the same tweeter. The woofer is a 6.5-inch driver with a glass fiber cone. Okay, hold on, wait for it. Oh yeah, sounds real nice. There's a bunch of other science going on in the woofer, which means when you play it loud, it sounds better. There's a bunch of stuff in their woofer, so if you want to check it out, click the link in there and you can read all about it, okay? Bottom line is, it's built very well. This speaker it's just got the details. They have a nice ring around the woofer. The tweeter, okay, so the tweeter on the Ultra and the tweeter on the Prime, although it's the same tweeter internally, they have a bit of a different look to them. The Ultras just look better. The Ultras are rear ported and there's an option to buy wire or buy amp them if one is so inclined, which you don't have that option on the Primes. The Ultras also have an enclosure volume which is 26% greater than the Primes, and I know that because I did math. I figured out the volumes and then I did more math. This one's 26 4.5% bigger. This is also 4.5 pounds heavier than the primes. The Ultras also have a 1-inch thick front baffle, which is good. They're internally braced very well. Takeaway here, the Ultras are built like a tank, but it's a pretty tank with shiny, shiny paint. Soundstage and imaging. One of my favorite songs is Wherever I May Roam by Metallica. At the 14-second mark, there is a that comes out of the right speaker, depending upon your room and depending upon how good the speakers are at imaging and soundstage. It should come very far right to, or almost feeling like it's coming right and behind you. Bottom line is the Ultras image very well. They also soundstage very well. Hey Jude by the Beatles. It's a very good song for imaging and soundstage because all the different instruments are kind of lined up left to right or right to left in between the speakers, and it was very good. There was a definitive separation between where each instrument was coming from. Soundstage and imaging also is dependent on your room. So if you have consistent side boundaries and a fairly consistent boundary to the rear, it lends itself to better soundstage and imaging. I tried these out in four different rooms. One was in the office where I do my near field listening. One was in my bedroom, and that's not an ideal situation because I have a little alcove. I put the speakers in the alcove, but it's not consistent to the sidewalls. Also listen to them upstairs in my playroom. It's not my playroom, it's the kids' playroom. And in my big living room. They soundstaged and imaged well in every situation. Obviously my room wasn't perfect because of the lack of consistency, but vertical off-axis performance, which basically means where your ear at is compared to the height of the tweeter, actually quite good. Hello by Adele, her voice sounded like it was above the speaker. Also, Coldplay off the Parachutes album was very good. His voice seemed like it was above the speakers. I don't remember which track it was. I like that record, but I don't know that record super well. Coldplay, Parachutes. Compared to the primes, the soundstage and imaging was fairly similar, if not exactly similar, except the Ultras I felt gave a bigger sense of depth than the primes. Overall, it was a great job. I didn't think it wasn't going to be because I sure like the prime. I like the primes so much I actually bought them from SVS. So, I almost dropped Yoda. So, let's talk about bass. Bass on the Ultras. Let's just say it is not lacking. There is only a 3 dB swing between the rating on the Prime and the rating on the Ultra, 48 versus 45. Okay? You would think, or one would think, that that's not going to be that big of a difference, but it is, and maybe it's because of the enclosure size or the woofer or whatever it is. The Ultras seem, to my ear and my experience, to make a lot more bass than the Primes. Even though they make more bass, it doesn't mean it's boomy or covering up any of the mids. It feels powerful and it feels unapologetic and pretty much effortless the way it reproduces. Bass. Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys. That song goes down very deep depending upon the speaker's roll off as far as how smoothly the bass rolls off. It can give you the impression of just how big and deep that song goes. Generally, if you don't have a subwoofer, you're not going to hear the magnitude of the bass in that song. But if you have a nice roll off, you still get an idea of how deep that bass is. And the SVS Ultras gave me an impression of just how deep that song is. Highway to Hell by AC/DC. It's a nice little audiophile track that I listened to. The reason why I listened to it is because the bass drum on Highway to Hell by AC/DC is very tight. It's not the traditional boom, that you hear on more modern rock and roll. So it's very tight, tight, tight. Now, I will say that the Ultras felt like they were giving that a bit more thickness than on some very neutral speakers, but it was not bad. Quite frankly, if you're going to boost the bass, that is where you want to boost the bass. It just gives a largeness to the music. And even though it may be coloring the bass just a bit, it's right where you want to color it, in the lines, like a nice picture of a cactus. Bass clarity, tone, texture, whatever you want to call it. Rooster by Alice in Chains off the MTV Unplugged. The bass line in there, if you got really good clarity on a woofer, you can hear some subtle nuances, almost like the string, well, obviously the string's vibrating, but it makes, you can hear the string vibrating a little bit better. Now here's where the ultras really start to pull away from the primes. It's not necessary, so it is in bass extension, it is in the amount of bass, but the real difference is in the texture, the nuances of the bass. And the ultras are flat out just better than the primes. Let's talk about mid-range. So let's just get this out of the way. I don't think the primes are a dead, flat, neutral speaker, and good. I don't want them to be. A lot of speakers that are completely neutral can seem boring. Ultras are anything but boring, as well as their younger brother, the primes. As far as mid-range goes, there is still a lot of body on the bottom end with male vocals, acoustic guitars, again, Rooster by Alice in Chains off the MTV Unplugged. There is not only a lot of acoustic guitars and layering of acoustic guitar, there's also harmonies, okay? So if you don't have a lot of clarity in the mid-range or a lot of control over the mid-range, those harmonies can just come together and almost sound like one voice. That was not the case with the ultras. I could definitely hear the different voices, and not only the different voices, but the nuances and the differences in those voices. Very well done. As far as female vocals go, Hello by Adele. Her voice, and here's we're getting into the tweeter a little bit, but her voice was extremely detailed without seeming unrealistically so. Sometimes on speakers that utilize an aluminum dome tweeter, the upper mid-range can seem a bit fatiguing. Not so on the SVS Ultras. That is why I actually purchased the Prime. While aluminum dome tweeters can give one a sense of detail and clarity that isn't always found on different materials, soft dome tweeters, things like that, sometimes they have a tendency to be a bit fatiguing. That's why I love the primes. And guess what? The ultras don't have any fatigue either, which means these speakers beg to be turned up. Sometimes when you turn up a speaker, it just seems shouty, but these don't. Even with an aluminum dome, they don't sound shouty at all. I think this is the best implementation of an aluminum dome tweeter that I've heard. These two, brother, big brother, little brother. Mid-range is fantastic, although there may be a bit of a scoop, probably around 800, maybe up to 1500, but if it is a scoop, it's not very much, probably a couple, 2-3 dB. And if there's a scoop, that's where I want it to be, because believe it or not, fatigue actually starts to happen in the mid-range and not necessarily up in the treble area. So, speaking of treble, let's talk about treble. Treble. So, I'm a detail nut. I love detail, but I love detail without fatigue. Some of my favorite speakers have AMT tweeters. And if some speakers color the bass by boosting it, and AMT, I believe, sometimes colors the treble. Although it's very pleasing to my ear, it doesn't always seem natural. The treble on the ultras, and the primes for that matter, is ultra clear, but not too clear that it doesn't sound realistic. I always listen to Sinnerman by Nina Simone because at the beginning there is 16th notes on the hi-hat. I played the drums a little bit in high school and junior high. I'm a heck of a drummer then, right? Anyway, there's many times that I hit the hi-hat with a drumstick. So I know what it sounds like. And if you blindfolded me, and I actually have a hi-hat here. Okay, so I got my daughter a drum set for Christmas, okay? Sometimes I play it because I've got to teach her how to play the drums. Anyway, so we have a hi-hat in the house. If we brought it down and somebody was playing the 16th notes and then they stopped and then they played this, I probably wouldn't be able to hear the difference because it's that realistic. Treble is not just about the upper frequencies, but it's also about the snap of the percussion. And percussion is a great way to learn about treble on your speakers, because some speakers, while they reproduce the higher notes, it doesn't sound natural. It often sounds like white noise piped in at the right frequency at the right time. It's brief. Not on the SVS Ultras. Weezer's cover of Africa by Toto, there is a lot of with the cymbals, and it spreads out and it hangs in the air. And if your tweeter doesn't do a good job of cymbal decay, it hangs in the air less. With the Ultras and the Primes, it just hung in the air like the smell of a burning tire. It just hangs in the air, except it doesn't smell. It sounds great. That was a bad analogy. Harvester of Sorrow, not only a great audiophile song, it's a great way to test the treble on your speakers because there's an awful lot of cymbal stuff going on. And this speaker did it really well. Again, it's about the realism. It's about the separation. It's about hearing different instruments in different places. It's about space as well. Rooster, again, Alice in Chains. I'm sorry, there's that song you can do a lot with, okay? So, Rooster by Alice in Chains off the MTV Unplugged. It's a live recording, and it's recorded very well. Gives a larger sense of space. What are my final thoughts? Final thoughts. If you want to know everything about a speaker in about 5 minutes or less, I don't know how long the track is, put on Eulogy by Tool. It is a slow burn at the beginning, and instruments are layered on top of instruments. There is a lot of soundstage and imaging, and I think it's a xylophone at the beginning. But the xylophone, I think about, I don't know, a minute into it, gets right at the top of the mid-range. So kind of where the treble and mid-range start to cross over each other. If a speaker is fatiguing that it's really harsh, okay, on the old ears. It never was harsh here. Then the guitar comes in. That guitar should be crisp, but yet full and almost startling when it comes on, okay? The Ultras handled that song with ease and the grace and the delicacy that every speaker should handle Eulogy by Tool. This is a fantastic speaker. Of course, this is meant for dual duty, but I would argue that this speaker can stand on its own and go toe-to-toe with other speakers in the category that are really meant for music and less about home theater. The speaker is very exciting, but the one thing I don't like about exciting speakers sometimes is fatigue. And the Ultras and the Primes don't have any. They beg to be turned up, enjoyed, and this speaker will move you. Now, is it worth twice as much as its younger brother? Ultimately, that's up to you. It does have better bass from a roll-off perspective, from a bass clarity perspective, from a bass tone perspective. It's better. It's better looking. Well, I don't know. Most people will consider this better looking, but I kind of like the simple matte finish. This is more my style, okay? But don't get me wrong, I love this speaker, but more subdued. Let me just try that out. Hold on. Yeah. So is it worth twice as much? It's up to you. And I hate to say that. That's kind of a cop-out, right? But it really is up to you. It's a better speaker. It just is a better speaker. The top end is similar, but again, more soundstage, more depth, better bass, better package. It's better. It is better. Is it twice as good? I don't know, but it is quite a bit better. And the Ultras are going into a speaker shootout with the ELAC Unify reference as well as the Wharfdale Evo 4.2. So we'll see how they do against those other two. That sounded kind of cheesy. Anyway, if you want to support the channel, sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/cheapaudioman. Every Sunday night we have Patreon-only Zooms. We also have a Patreon-only Facebook group. You can also sign up for Amazon Music. Click on the link and sign up. You get 3 months of Amazon Music for free, and you also get, I think, 3 months of Disney Plus for free. You can also use the links in the description. If you buy the Ultras or the Primes, I do get a commission. Most of the other links in the description are affiliate links as well. So don't binge watch anything. Binge listen through either of these SVS bookshelf speakers because it's going to fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.